Greetings and welcome to another episode of Just Teach. I'm your teacher for today's lesson, Tamika Lewis, and we've been studying the UMI annual commentary. Right now we're in week 8 and our lesson is the bond of friendship. We're going to be coming out of 1 Samuel chapter 18 verses 1 through 5, and then we're going to skip to chapter 19 verses 1 through 7. And we're going to be covering 3 points today. Friends covenant crafted, friends covenant challenged, and friends covenant confirmed. And as we're going through the lesson, I want you to keep this question at the back of your mind. How do you determine whether to risk your own comfort for that of a friend or a loved one? So let's jump right into it. Chapter 18 verses 1 through 5. And it came to pass, when he had made an end of speaking unto Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day, and would let him go no more home to his father's house. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant, because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him, and gave it to David, and his garments, even to his sword, and to his bow, and to his girdle. And David went out whithersoever Saul sent him, and behaved himself wisely. And Saul set him over the men of war. And he was accepted in the sight of all people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. So we see here in verses 1 through 4, if you go back and read the previous chapter, David has been brought into the presence of Saul after he's defeated Goliath the giant, the Philistine. And Goliath is actually a 9-foot giant Philistine who had been challenging Israel and God, and also making a mockery of the people and their God, and defying their nation. So he had challenged for someone from Israel to battle him. And out of all the people, no one would face Goliath because they feared him so much. And for 40 days, Goliath defied Israel until it was David that rose up to challenge Goliath. And keep in mind, David at this point is just a shepherd boy. He has no military experience. He's just been herding sheep at this point in his life. And with the help of God, with 5 smooth stones, a sling, and of course with the anointing and power of God, David was able to defeat Goliath. And at that point, the Philistines fled, and Israel pursued and killed all the Philistines. So when this got back to Saul, he was so impressed with David that he had his commander return him to his presence. And he's at this point asking David about himself, his history, and who his people are and what he does. And right away, as David is giving an account to Saul about who he is, it's almost as if he's giving a testimony to Saul of how God has moved in his life. And immediately, Jonathan connects with David on a level that most people don't really connect with other people they've never met before. So their bond is immediate. And the Hebrew word knit is kashar. And that word means to bind, league together, or it speaks of 2 or more people united in mind with one common goal. And someone from today's time would probably refer to them as kindred spirits, being that they would have the same mindset, opinions, and feelings or interests. So one of the reasons that he may have connected with David on a level like this is, 1, they both have a connection in a relationship with God, and they've both had military experience at some point. So David, or I would say Jonathan, Jonathan at this time he's not only the king's son, but he's also a soldier. He's a military leader. And he's also brave, just like David. So both of them are loyal people. They have that in common because David is very loyal. And considering some of the things he's hearing David speak of, he sees himself in him and immediately in his spirit connects with David. So Matthew 22:39 reads, "And the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself." And that's referring to the commandments. So we know that God gave us a commandment to love him with all of our soul, our heart, and mind. And then he later goes to say, and the second is like unto it, that thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. So we see here, Jonathan loves David as his own soul. So they form a covenant of friendship a few verses down. And the friendship is, so when you think covenant, a lot of people think covenant and they think God and his covenant with his people. But a covenant can be between that of two people outside of the relationship with God. We even covered that in last week's lesson when we discussed Ruth and Naomi and how Ruth made a covenant with Naomi, how she would not leave her side. And she even vowed to God in her covenant with Naomi. So we see here that Jonathan is laying himself open and bare and vulnerable in the presence of David. So he's wanting to have a friendship with David on the level that he's opening himself up to someone that he just met. And in his vulnerability, he strips himself of his robe, all of his garments, his girdle, which was his belt, his sword and bow, everything he's wearing, he strips of it and he gives it to David. So we see here that some characteristics of a covenant friendship is commitment, intimacy, vulnerability, faithfulness, and support. So we see Jonathan exhibit all these characteristics in the presence of David in the moment that he's making a covenant with him. And you have to be pretty vulnerable to do something like that and open yourself up to someone like that, because you don't know if they feel the same way that you do about them. So the fact that David was accepting to his covenant shows you that he felt the same way as well in his spirit. So in him giving David his robe, mind you, he's the king's son, so everything he's wearing is royal garments. And he's giving this to David in commitment and love in their covenant. And his love for David is a foreshadowing of the words and actions of Christ in John 15:13 that reads, "Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends." So there's a lot of parallels in this moment, because he's giving his royal garments to a lowly shepherd boy such as David. And that's prophetical to the acknowledgement of God's call on David's life to be the future king of Israel, and also that the King of Kings, which is Jesus, is also to come from David's lineage. So that's pretty interesting to me. But we go to the next point here, and we're discussing the friend's covenant is challenged, and that's going to be in verses 19-1. So let's read that. "And Saul spoke to Jonathan, his son, and to all his servants, that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David. And Jonathan told David, Saul, my father seeks to kill you. Therefore, be on your guard in the morning. Stay in a secret place and hide yourself. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak to my father about you. And if I learn anything, I will tell you." And Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father, and said to him, "Let not the king sin against his servant David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his deeds have brought good to you. For he took his life in his hand, and he struck down the Philistine, and the Lord worked a great salvation for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then would you sin against innocent blood by killing David without cause?" And Saul listened to the voice of Jonathan. Saul swore, "As the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death." And Jonathan called David, and Jonathan reported to him all these things. And Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as before. So let's cover verses 1 through 3 of chapter 19. We see here that Saul goes from being enamored with David and his ability to defeat Goliath, and he all of a sudden goes to hating him and wanting to kill him. So what happened between the praises, the excitement, and now I want to kill you? So if you go and read in between the verses that we missed in chapter 18, you'll see that because of the accolades that the people were giving David after he defeated Goliath, Saul became jealous of David because of that. Mind you, he's the king. He has pretty much everything that anyone could ever want. And he already gets the glory from everything David's doing because he's king of Israel. And everything that's done in the name of Israel, he gets glory for that. So because of the popularity that David was getting from the people, he became jealous, and his jealousy grew to the point that he felt threatened by him and his growing popularity. So much so that he positioned David in higher ranks, because he knew that if David was in a position at the front of the troops, or he's on the front line in battle, he had a greater chance to be killed. So he's already plotting David's demise. And we see, despite his attempts on David's life, God continues to keep his hand on him. He keeps delivering and protecting him. And he even starts including, you see here, after everything he's trying isn't working, he's including his servants and his very own son, Jonathan, who just so happens to be David's closest friend. So remember, Jonathan made a pact with David that they would love and protect each other. And they're pretty much like brothers to one another at this point. And Saul knows this. There's nothing he doesn't know about his son's relationship with David. He's well aware of how close they are. So Saul is challenging his son at this point and pitting him against his friend. But mind you, Jonathan is not only Saul's son, but he's also a lover of God. He has a relationship with God, and he wants to honor God, and he wants to honor the pact that he's made with David. So despite the tension that he has between protecting his friend and his father trying to use him against his friend, he actually does the right thing to try to protect his friend and keep the pact that he made before God. So in verses 4 through 7, we see that Jonathan took advantage of an opportunity. Not only did he warn David to keep an eye out and hide and avoid his father, but he also takes that opportunity to talk to his father and try to convince him why he shouldn't kill David. So keep in mind the state of mind that Saul is in I'm pretty sure he's just seeing red at this point, and he just wants to kill him at any opportunity he has. So his son warns him, one, David is innocent. He's done nothing to threaten you. So it doesn't make any sense for you to kill him. He's pretty much innocent. And why would you want innocent blood on your hands? He also tells him that David has served him faithfully. And God is obviously using him to bring glory to you and also to the nation. So he's letting him know to kill someone that God has clearly anointed to bring glory to your name, you're pretty much destroying things for yourself. So Saul is so blinded in his jealousy towards David, he's not even recognizing the fact that God's hand is on David and how God has been using David to give them victories over their enemies. In Romans 8:31, it reads, "What shall we then say to these things? If God be for us, who can be against us?" We see in all the attempts that Saul has tried to make against David's life at this point have all failed. Even when he tried to include his own son, everything he did failed because God's hand was on David. And David was anointed by God to be the future king of Israel. So we know that as long as God's hand is on David, no harm can come to him, because whatever plans God has for his life has not come to pass, and it's not his time to go. So anything he's trying is failing because he has God on his side. We see so many good things in this story here between David and Jonathan. Even though Jonathan was the son of the king, he had everything that he could possibly want, being the son of a king. He valued his friendship with David more than his position as the king's son. And Proverbs 18:24 tells us that a man that hath friends must show himself friendly, and there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. We know that Jonathan and David had no relation by blood, but God aligned their paths and gave them this godly friendship, something that we don't see a lot. Even in today's time, you have to be very careful of the people that you call friend, because some of the people closest to you are the very people, just like Saul was close to David. He still envied him to the point that he wanted to kill him. So we have to keep in mind that we need to seek God for godly friendships like this, because this story is proof that God will align you with someone in your life that is anointed to be your friend. And not only that, everything that God places in our life is meant to bring us joy. And scripture tells us that the blessings of the Lord maketh rich and addeth no sorrow. So to have a godly friendship like this is definitely a blessing. And true friendship requires sacrificial love. And we see here that Saul's son was even willing to sacrifice his relationship with his father to protect the godly relationship that God had blessed him with through David. Proverbs 17:17 says, "A friend loveth at all times, and a brother is born for adversity." So we see the pact and the bond that Saul and David had was more than just friendship. They were more like brothers to one another. And if you read further down the line in the chapters of 1 Samuel, you'll see David does eventually die of natural causes, but it's only because it was his time to go and because God's hand was on him, and Saul was not able to kill him as he had planned. Saul eventually dies, and David ends up becoming the king of Israel. And he keeps his pact that he made with his friend Jonathan, and even brought his son to live in the palace with him. So this lesson is definitely a blessing to me, because it shows me God He desires for us to have godly relationships, and He'll put people in our path that will love us unconditionally and will take up for us and will defend us even in the midst of adversity. So I hope I've said something today to bless you in today's lesson. I hope that you will meet me here again next week for the next lesson. And until we meet again, have a great week.
Want to let everyone know we do provide notes with each lesson here at Just Teach Ministries. If you click the More button in the description of the video, there's a blue hyperlink under the title Lesson Notes. When you click the link, a PDF version of the notes do appear. You can download those and use them in any way that's a blessing or benefit to you. We do also house all of the notes at justteachministries.com. If you go to the website and navigate to the appropriate testament, whether old or new, and then navigate to the appropriate book. At the bottom of that page, there's a button for each lesson. It's got the title of the lesson along with the text. You click the button, and again, a PDF version of the notes there just for you. These are just our encouragement and our way to say thank you for being a part of the Just Teach Ministries community. Just Teach Ministries is on several media platforms. We're on YouTube, Instagram, Spotify, Podbean, and many, many others. And certainly we have audio format versions of the lessons at justteachministries.com. So wherever you like to get your media, please come out and fellowship with Just Teach Ministries. We'd love to have you a part of our community there and certainly help us spread the message of the gospel all around the world. If you'd like to be a financial support to Just Teach Ministries, we are a listener-funded ministry. There are 4 ways that you can support, whether it's through the P.O. Box, CashApp, PayPal, or Super Thanks if you're on YouTube. 2 Corinthians 9 and 10 promises us, "Now he that ministers seed to the sower, both ministers bread for your food and multiplies your seed sown. Truly God loves a cheerful giver." We appreciate you for your support and kindness.